What does a relationship look like between a Type 6 Loyalist and a Type 7 Enthusiast? Well, let's start off by talking about a few things they have in common. The most obvious connection between Enneagram 6s and 7s is the fact that they're each other's wing. So the 7 wing 6, aka the entertainer, and the 6 wing 7, aka the buddy, will likely have the most in common. These subtypes are often a bit more playful, upbeat, and relationally focused than their counterparts, the 7 wing 8 and the 6 wing 5. Now, if you want to learn more about the nuances of these Enneagram subtypes or any other concepts you hear throughout this episode, just be sure to check out the complete guides that I've got linked for you in the description below. For now, though, it's just important to remember that every Enneagram type is going to be influenced by both wings to some degree. So for this couple in particular, the 7's desire to be stimulated by their environment or activities, when mixed with the 6's desire to form secure relationships with other people, generally creates a very socially active pairing that spends most of their time, energy, or money on things that will either catalyze or elevate communal experiences. So you can probably find the 6-7 couple planning your next group trip to Europe, or leading volunteer organizations on the weekend, or turning their backyard into a mini resort space. All right, the next Enneagram theory that connects 6s and 7s is what's known as the triad centers. Both 6s and 7s are in the head center. So as thinking types, they're primarily concerned with the future, which then makes them anticipate both the best and worst case scenarios. And I think you know which type goes where on that. Also, as thinking types, both 6s and 7s struggle to quiet the mind, which then causes a fair amount of anxiety or restless activity. This can make focusing on one thing at a time a pretty difficult task for this pairing, especially when life gets stressful. However, when healthy, their mind can be far more like a waffle rather than a pancake. So when the syrup of life rains down upon them, they're able to compartmentalize their focus and become highly strategic thinkers that are capable of pursuing a myriad of different responsibilities, hobbies, or even careers. Okay, last shared trait worth noting is the highly independent nature of both types, which may be surprising to hear given the relationally oriented nature of the 6. But it's important to remember that 6s want security, and feeling smothered is the quickest way to make them feel insecure about the relationship. Now, 7s also hate to feel smothered because that makes them feel trapped. And if you know anything about Enneagram 7s, then you know that feeling trapped is tied to their greatest fear of being stuck in a painful or boring situation. So, at the end of the day, you got two highly independent folks with a very active mind and a strong desire for some uplifting communal activities. All right, with those shared traits out of the way, it's time to dig in a little deeper and take a look at what specifically attracts the Type 6 Loyalist to the Type 7 Enthusiast and vice versa. One of the primary things that attracts Enneagram 6s to 7s is their confident can-do attitude. 6s often struggle with a fear that their actions are going to compromise their security, which can make them a bit anxious, pessimistic, or just really indecisive when it comes to making big decisions with big unknown implications. The 7, on the other hand, operates with this infectious level of self-assurance that helps them navigate risk with ease because they're so well practiced when it comes to blocking out negative emotions like fear and anxiety. And that's our cue to take a look at the harmonic triad, which groups Enneagram types based on the way they cope with painful situations. You can see that 6s are in the reactive group alongside 4s and 8s, while 7s are in the positive outlook group alongside 2s and 9s. Now, this isn't always a recipe for attraction, as you'll hear when we get to the section on conflict, but in general, the 7's resilient optimism is a very welcome trait in the 6's life, as they often need a little help shifting their focus from the rain clouds to the beautiful sunrise just beyond them. Another point of attraction for 6s in this relationship is the way that 7s give them permission to lean into a more energizing and fulfilling life. Average 6s tend to think in terms of what they should do rather than what they would or could enjoy doing. This mindset can be explained in part by the Hornevian triad, which groups Enneagram types based on their broader social behaviors. 6s are in the compliant group, while 7s are in the assertive group. Compliant types can be very responsible people because they're hyper aware of the rules, who's in charge, and how to stay within the good graces of their specific group or communal structure. Assertive types, on the other hand, are defined by this willingness to go their own way in search of what makes them feel truly alive. So this relationship can often look a lot like Ferris Bueller dragging his best friend Cameron along for a day full of harmless yet life-giving shenanigans, and actually some pretty illegal, unethical stuff as well. But ultimately, Cameron needed someone to help him break the cycle of repressed anxiety so he could live his life to the fullest, rather than turning into some hypochondriac that was too afraid to stand up to his daddy. Seriously, go watch that movie if you haven't yet. It's amazing. Anyway, that's enough about classic 80s cinema and the 6's attraction to the 7. Time now to switch gears and talk about what 7s find uniquely attractive about 6's. 7s love it when someone yes-ands their ideas, but what they really need is someone to say yes, but ... then fill in the blank with a more realistic or responsible perspective. For 7s, that perspective usually comes from someone like the Type 6 Loyalist, who's great at being a sort of throttle for the 7's engine that just wants to floor it towards every exciting opportunity. Now, I know some 7s out there are probably thinking, that sounds terrible. I don't want anyone trying to slow me down. But healthy 7s recognize that life is better and more sustainable when they've got someone like the Type 6 around who won't co-sign every bad decision just to keep the good times rolling. And honestly, they probably will co-sign a few bad decisions just because they're trying to be supportive. But in general, the 6 brings a far more modest and practical perspective that helps the 7 recognize when it's time to slow down and think things through. The 6's steady sense of commitment can also help the 7 learn the value of keeping their word, which often looks like saying no to that next best thing, and instead finding a renewed interest in the people and things that they may have taken for granted. And that's pretty much the 7's movement of integration to the more focused minimalism of the Type 5 investigator, which is why 6's with a strong 5 wing can be even more attractive, as they embody some of the key traits of a healthy, grounded 7. 6's with the 5 wing also tend to be more choosy about who they let into their lives because they value their independence about as much as they value a strong relationship. So the 7 usually feels this nice balance between having an intense connection with their partner, all while having plenty of personal space to do their own thing. Okay, last point of attraction worth noting is that 6's can be incredibly warm and supportive in ways that ease the 7's compulsive anxiety about having to constantly meet their own needs. I know a lot of 7's don't like to hear this, but a major trend in their childhood development is tied to having a somewhat absent, stoic, or just kind of distracted mom that didn't put a lot of energy into nurturing the 7. She may be a real great lady and the 7 may love her to death, but something in their interactions told the 7 that she wasn't going to help them when they felt bored, lonely, or sad. And so the 7 found ways to entertain themselves out of these painful experiences by indulging in whatever playful or pleasurable activities they could find. Now fast forward to adulthood, and many 7's become very self-centered because they've learned that if they don't take care of their own needs, then no one else will. Now 6's, on the other hand, are almost always concerned about their loved ones because they learned as children that secure relationships equal a secure life, and that's what they crave above all else. This makes 6's phenomenal at checking in with their loved ones and showing up whenever they're needed and taking on more than their fair share of responsibilities. All of this makes the 7 feel cared for in ways that can be deeply moving without being overly sentimental, as the 7's heart is usually uncomfortable with the more ooey-gooey emotions. Alright, speaking of being a little uncomfortable, it's time to move on from these points of attraction and talk about the 7's least favorite topic, which is conflict. Hey there, friend. Looks like you're a little more than halfway through this Enneagram relationship episode, which means it's a great time to not only watch this fancy little neon graphic float off into the distance, but to hit those like and subscribe buttons, you know? You know what I mean? You know those buttons that are sitting right there? Don't be coy, you know where they are. You know, if you're feeling non-committal, you can just hit the like button. It's still really helpful. Okay, let's get back to it. A major source of conflict between 6's and 7's can be tied to one of the classic Big 5 personality traits, which are extroversion, openness, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and our focus for today, neuroticism. Neuroticism is essentially the measure of how often and intensely a person experiences negative emotion. Now, 6's generally test high in neuroticism, while 7's test extremely low. This means there's a huge difference between these partners' experience of pain and pleasure, not just in the relationship, but in life in general. 6's typically expect a fair amount of pain or adversity to come their way, which is why they worry more and get more upset with the 7's careless behaviors. 7's, on the other hand, expect and kind of demand that life be enjoyable, which is why they move away from anyone with a consistently negative mood or overly critical mindset. Now, to bring this focus back to the world of Enneagram theory, let's take another look at the harmonic triad, which we discussed during the 6's attraction to the 7. As reactive types, 6's have a visceral, often highly emotional reaction to painful situations that they need their partner to either respect or reflect back to them. The problem is that 7's as positive outlook types are the complete opposite. So when something blows up in their face, they just pivot to something new and pretend that that painful thing over there, that didn't really happen, or it wasn't really that bad, or it was actually a blessing in disguise. These polar opposite responses can create a vicious cycle where the 7 dismisses all of the 6's reactions as overly dramatic, while the 6 believes that the 7 is just hiding their real feelings, and so they provoke the 7 until they snap, at which point they're finally mirroring the 6's negative emotions. It's typically during one of these heated moments that both 6's and 7's also realize they share a fear of commitment. Now, 6's are afraid of committing to someone that seems so disinterested in or incapable of protecting them from harm, while 7's are afraid of committing to someone that seems like such a neurotic drag, especially given the fact that 7's prefer to keep their options open anyway. Ironically, despite kind of having one foot out the door, both partners are surprisingly willing to stay in this relationship for quite some time. Unhealthy 6's are often just too afraid to leave a bad relationship because their sense of security is all wrapped up in whatever's familiar, and so they'd rather go down with the ship than venture out into the unknown. Unhealthy 7's can also have a hard time cutting things off because they're super attracted to what they can't have. So if the 6 starts to pull away, the 7 feels like, damn, they've never looked better. Ultimately, the big red flag for this couple is when they start spending more and more time apart, as distance just makes the 6 justify more aggressive attacks on the 7, which makes the 7 feel more justified in their self-gratifying escapes outside the home. All right, there's your glimpse into what conflict may look like between 6's and 7's. And since I can't leave you with that bleak picture of a relationship gone wrong, let's wrap things up with just a little relationship advice that may help the 6-7 pairing have a healthier future together. All right, my first tip is for the 6 in particular, and it's to try your best to curate any difficult conversations that you want to have with the 7. By that I mean, don't just address everything you're upset about all at once. Instead, pick the most important concern or stressor in your life, and then really distill it down to the key points of what you'd like the 7 to change and why. Sometimes it really helps to practice this conversation with an impartial friend or counselor before bringing it to the 7. That way you can feel truly clear and confident in your approach. Now, the reason you want to pick your words so carefully with a 7 is because underneath that fun-loving exterior is a heart that's very sensitive to criticism. So if you hit them with a barrage of unfiltered complaints, they'll likely dismiss everything you have to say, and those pearls of legitimate concern are going to fall on deaf ears. Now, speaking of legitimate concerns, something else that comes up a lot for 6's in this relationship is the way that 7's will act with their self-interest in mind rather than prioritizing their partner's needs. This is entirely foreign to 6's that feel like it's their responsibility to make sacrifices for the good of their relationships. So, 2 things to remember here. First, don't take on more than your fair share of responsibilities because this will quickly become a codependent situation. And second, start asking the 7 to own a few recurring responsibilities within the relationship. 7's can be surprisingly responsive to clear, actionable requests, especially if it's something they can knock out with relative ease, like picking up the kids from school or cleaning the bathroom. Now, they may hire a maid to do it, but hey, they got the job done and you got to see some level of investment in the relationship. At that point, it's up to you whether you need to see more investment or if you're good. All right, let's shift to the 7. One thing you 7's can do that would be a profound act of love in this relationship is to give the 6 permission every once in a while to just unload any fears or frustration that they're bottling up inside. Some 6's playfully call these a panic session, where they get to blurt out everything that's weighing on them, no matter how irrational or irritable they may sound. And I called this a profound act of love intentionally, because I know how incredibly de-energizing sitting with negative emotions can be for you 7's that just want to go all carpe diem. But if you can hold space for the 6 to vent all their fear, doubt, anger, or anxiety, then they'll feel so much freer to indulge in the wondrous, exciting adventures that you've got planned for them. Now, kind of on a similar note, if you feel like the 6 is starting to spiral with anxiety, then try just getting them out of the house for a while. The 6 may resist you at first, as they resist many things at first, but if you can spend some quality time together doing something simple, like playing around in the park or hitting up a movie or just enjoying a nice dinner at a cozy restaurant, then that can really help to bring the 6 back to the present moment, as they often feel grounded by quality time with a loving, familiar person. All right, last thing for you 7s is to prioritize the 6's passion, whether it's their career, a side hustle, or some life-giving hobby. I say that because 7s often get tunnel vision when they're moving towards something they're really excited about, which then has this subtle way of pulling resources away from the 6 to support the 7's goals. So if you feel yourself moving faster and faster towards some exciting opportunity, just remember to occasionally pump the brakes and check in with the 6 to make sure you're not taking all their time, energy, money, or love for granted. And on that note, I'll pump the brakes on my advice and close things out as we always do with the patented YGAT relationship rating system. First up on the YGAT relationship rating system is the spice meter, and I'm going to put this couple just over medium spice, since there's a lot of anxious energy stewing beneath the surface that could lead to some pretty spicy nights together, either fighting or, well, you know. Next up is the power meter, and this is definitely going to be a productive pairing, as 6s are usually great at helping the 7 to materialize their ambitious plans. But since 7s don't really care about climbing traditional career ladders, and 6s can be a bit shy with self-promotion, think tall poppy syndrome, I'm going to keep them just a hair past the midway point at about a 6 out of 10. That leaves us with the fun meter, which is an easy one, because this couple definitely packs in the good times, whether it be hosting parties or getting tons of stamps on that passport, especially if it's a 6-wing 7 with a 7-wing 6. So let's put them about 2/3 of the way up the meter without breaking into 90 spring break, since the responsible nature of the 6 will hopefully keep the 7 from going too crazy. All right, folks, there you have it. The Enneagram 6-7 pairing. A medium spice, fairly productive, and anxiously adventurous couple that you would probably love to have living next door. That's a wrap on this Enneagram relationship episode for the Type 7 Enthusiast with the Type 6 Loyalist. If you're shutting it down here, then I'll say thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please do me a little favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons for me on your way out. And hey, if you're sticking around for more Enneagram goodness, then I've got plenty of relationship-themed content for you to choose from right here on the screen, as well as some more lighthearted content if you 7s need to have some fun. Take your pick.